Okay, we'll open this work session. And Randy, will you take roll, please?
Here.
Okay, we'll open this work session. Randy, will you take roll, please? Are we good?
Everything all right? Hey, Brandy, you need to speak into that microphone if you're looking for a role. No, we can't hear you.
Supervisor Ayers,
Here.
Chairman Lyons.
Here, thank you. While the room will be open to the public due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 10 attendees other than county staff will be allowed in the room at one time. Per the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Executive Order 63, all persons over the age of 5 that do not have a precluding medical condition are asked to wear a face covering. Health insurance update.
Well, I don't see our consultant on yet. I'm trying to text him right now.
He was just on his way down.
No, do you see anybody in the waiting room?
Oh, yeah, I've got, well, for attendees, we have Jay Gordon at One Digital and Kay Hubbard at One Digital. Would you like me
Okay.
to promote them both?
Can you promote them?
Sure.
All right. So last spring, the board reviewed health insurance options, which included a self-funded path, and ultimately the board stayed with local choice, but wished to revisit the self-funded path again this year and go out for bids. Jim Gordon and Kelly Hubbard with One Digital have shared their findings with the personnel committee or are on Zoom to present these to the full board. So Jim, Kelly, are you there? Is he muted?
Should be unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having us this afternoon. Appreciate the time. Really what I've been asked to do, and please let me know if you can't hear me, is just give an overview of the assessment that we've done kind of off cycle. Just to remind everybody, we're a July 1 renewal with the health plan, which is currently with local choice. As we have for the last couple of years, we have gone out off cycle back in late November, December, and using current claim data, looked at repricing the group if they were to self-fund, went out to the market to all of the independent carriers that are available in the market, which included Anthem, Cigna, United Healthcare, and Optima. We have narrowed this down, this presentation down to Anthem and Cigna, which are the two most competitive. We have not received the local choice renewal, but anticipate getting that mid-February. And at that time, we'll certainly update the numbers and do a comparison. For the comparison today, based on the claim data, we assumed a 9% rate increase for the local choice. I will say that the local choice pool is running well. And again, the county another year in a row is running very competitively as well. We've run 50%, 66%, and roughly about 57% the last 3 years, which really brings us to the point of the conversation, looking at ways to potentially put the county in a position to have more control and be able to capture more value and more margin. For purposes of the conversation, if you can see the screen that I have up in front of you, what I wanted to just show is that currently the county offers two plans. One is a traditional copay plan that has a $25 copay and a $40 specialist, and then also has some copays for urgent care and prescription. Everything that's done in a facility, i.e. a hospital, inpatient, outpatient, or ER, is subject to $1,000 deductible individual, $2,000 family, and then 20% coinsurance, not to exceed $5,000 or $10,000. In addition to that, we offer a high deductible health plan, which is a $2,800 plan, and then 20% coinsurance up to an out-of-pocket of $5,000. And the county does make an HSA contribution to that. For purposes of comparison, you can see we're assuming the same benefits for renewal, and again, projecting about a 9% rate increase, which is very conservative and may not be the number that actually comes in. And then we have two scenarios, one with Anthem and one with Cigna. And in both cases, we have matched the benefits almost identically. You'll notice Cigna has a $20 copay instead of $25. And on the fourth tier medications, Anthem has a 20% cost up to a maximum of $300 a month instead of the $55 that's currently in place. But for the most part, the benefits match currently what's in place almost identically. So we've kept that comparison very close. From a cost perspective, and again, we're having to make some assumptions because we're doing this off cycle prior to receiving the renewal. Currently with local choice, as you can see on this illustration, and this cost representation includes medical, dental, and vision. And roughly the local choice cost currently is running about $1,880,000. And you can see that the breakout is roughly $1.6 million to the county and a little over $300,000 to the employees. Assuming a 9% rate increase, we calculate it to be at just a little bit over $2 million. And if we maintain the same percentage increase, that would have the renewal coming in at about $1,768,000 for the county, and the employees picking up about $340,000 of that. And again, just reiterating that this is an assumption of about a 9% rate increase, which, knowing the group is running well and knowing the pool with local choice is running favorable, there's likelihood that it'll come in lower than that. We quoted two scenarios, one with Anthem, one with Cigna. What's projected here is the expected cost and then the maximum liability, i.e. the most you could pay in a given year. Anthem is coming in higher than the projected renewal, but certainly within a range that you would consider, especially given the conversations, consider a potential change. It's coming in at total expected liability of about $2.173 million. That includes medical, dental, and vision. We've got it broken out at the bottom for the county contribution to be just a little bit under $1.9 million, of the employees about $340,000. At expected, it's obviously running higher than that. That's the maximum level. That's going to be 125% of the claims over the expected claims. So the liability is higher, but in your worst case scenario, if you self-funded with Anthem and you had a horrendous year and you had a bunch of significant claims, that would be the most that the county would be on the hook for in a given year for the medical, dental, and the vision. In my 20 years on the consulting side, I've only seen this number hit twice by customers, and frankly, looking at the 3-year claim history with the county running between really 50 and 65%, I think there's a high probability over the next several years that we would have an opportunity to run below expected and capture savings. Cigna also provided a very competitive quote. Their expected cost is coming in at $1,836,000, which is actually a little bit below current, about 2.4% or $44,000 below current cost. Their max liability is coming in at $2.146 million, which is just a little bit over our projected renewal. One of my cautions would be that Anthem typically has deeper discounts in the market. Therefore, you'd expect them to do a better job of managing the costs a little more effectively. Cigna does have lower cost on the stop loss or the reinsurance, which is helping out their proposal. But the reality is no matter how the county were to run, if you were with Cigna and you had a horrible year, the 2,146,000 would be the total liability that would be faced by the county for medical, dental, and vision. Comment that I made to the leadership group would be that, if in fact this plays out to be too aggressive and the group runs higher, you're protected because their max liability, the most you would be responsible for is 2.1 million. But at the same time, it gets you into the self-funded model, gets you getting more detailed claim reporting, which allows us to better project and project out what the expectations would be as we look forward. And if you found that it wasn't competitive in year 2 or 3, then obviously you'd have the option to move to another provider such as Anthem. I think both options are compelling, given the discussions the county has had in its desire to get more control and take advantage of the savings that we've been leaving on the table over the last few years being part of local choice. As it pertains to local choice, as I mentioned a minute ago, we'll have the renewal, should have it in hand by the middle of February, hopefully ideally around the 15th, if not before. We have gotten some indication on some other municipal groups that the pool is running at a very competitively, and a number of groups have been communicated already. They're getting a negative, they're going to be receiving a negative increase. I think that combined with the fact that the county is running very well would also probably put us in a very good position not to have a buyout. If you're not familiar, when you're in local choice and you leave local choice, they hold the right to provide a financial buyout to get out of the pool. If you terminate July 1, they're going to calculate that at some point in the month of September, usually 60 days out. So we're not going to know exactly what it would be. But usually people that are penalized by that are ones that have obviously not run well and have hurt the pool. And frankly, I think Rockbridge County has benefited the local choice pool and done it for a number of years. So while I can't give you a hard number, I would be surprised if it would cost us anything as we look forward, but wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. So I will pause for a second and see if anybody has questions at this point.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
How much money are we leaving on the table?
Well, it's really hard to say when you're in local choice for a group of your size that has claim data. When you're running at a loss ratio, if I look at the last 3 years, you've run about 52%, 66%, and 57% in that plan year. The carriers are really targeting a loss ratio of 75 to 80%. That they're spending those 80 cents of every dollar on claims, 3 to 5% of margin, and 15% for administration and processing. So if you're running below 80% or certainly below 75%, you're leaving dollars on the table. And so when I look at a $1.8 million as your pool, 80% or 80%, 20% of that number is going to be break even for the carrier. Anything really below 75% is going to be profit. So I'd say, really anywhere between 15 and 20% of premium a year for the last 3 years is probably a reasonable assessment.
That's a lot of money.
And I mean, again, my caveat would be that every year fluctuates. In a group of your size, it only take a set of preemies or a significant health condition to skew the numbers. But for the last few years, the county has run well. So I would say, 15% of premium has probably been, not counting potential margin, has probably been the average number that we've foregone in the last few years. And, but again, I would encourage the board to look at this as this is a commitment for multiple years, because claims can be variable year over year, month to month. And, but the data shows, and the claim data shows, that if you move into this funding arrangement and you're committed to it for multiple years, it will be a winning proposition for the county.
Are all the doctors in the area and the hospitals in network, or?
Yeah, so in both cases, whether it's Anthem or Cigna, they have all the hospitals, and the network with Anthem is going to be the exact same network you have today with Local Choice. So nothing changes there. With Cigna, I would say that the facility network is going to be identical. They've got all the hospitals. They don't have holes, and they're probably going to have 95% of the providers. Where you would have a hole, it might be in some of the subspecialty groups. But if, we have time. So what I would say is, if we get to the point where this is something you're entertaining and you're looking and you want to take a harder look at Cigna, then one of the things we had already discussed with the leadership group was doing a, network match, trying to get a list of providers, if we can, from Local Choice that the membership uses, and cross-reference that with Cigna's network. With Anthem's network, it'll be a complete match.
The initial look into that, Dan, from the committee group showed, as Jim said, very little missing.
Jay, I couldn't hear that. Do you mind repeating?
It's in a way, I can't do it. The committee group, the little bit of research that we did there initially showed that there weren't many gaps in doctors and coverage.
Yes, that's correct. And again, as you do this evaluation, if we're going to dig deeper into Cigna, I would recommend doing a network match drill, down to the level of the facilities that were accessed in the last 12 months by the membership.
Jim, how will it impact our cost? I noticed in the notes that the first year of the high deductible plan there, I think there was 3 participants, and in 2018 there was 97. If more of our employees move towards that, how will that impact our cost?
Well, and the more employees that continue to move to the high deductible plan is going to certainly positively impact reducing cost. I mean, what we're trying to do through continued education is help our staff members do a better job of managing their day-to-day expenses and the decisions they make around accessing and utilizing care on a daily basis. Obviously, for the real health conditions, are going to get immediate care, but the more people that continue to transition to the high deductible plan, I would say you're going to see an average lower trend of healthcare. Ambient healthcare trend right now for a traditional plan is about 9 to 10% annually, and the high deductible plans are running at about 5 to 6. So with an absence of unforeseen large claimants, you should see your overall cost trend down the more people that transition to that side. The other thing I'd mention is, the big thing with self-funding is we would model out the premium equivalents that the county would charge the employees, just like they do now, and model out what the county would contribute on a monthly basis. And we would build, we'd contribute like we do now, a fixed dollar amount monthly to manage cost and claims. And with this transition to self-funding from the TLC platform, you would, certainly over the first 90 to 120 days, you will build up a surplus, because there'll be a lag in claims that'll help you manage claims as you start to accumulate those in the second half of the year. And then ideally, as you get through the year. If we continue to run as we have been, then we should have a surplus that we'll be able to carry forward to help manage our expenses.
And I noticed, I guess, row 7, for the renewal and then for the Anthem and Cigna, it's the same dollar amount for the employee contribution.
It is, and what we did there was we assumed in column E, which is illustrative renewal for local choice, a 9% increase. If it comes in at a -4, like some of your neighbors are getting, obviously, we can reallocate those dollars or reconfigure that number. But we picked a number that we could apply equally across the board for illustrative purposes. But as soon as we receive the actual renewal, then we'll rework the financials for you to get updated numbers.
What I was wondering more so is, like with the Anthem, well, with the local choice, it appears the county picks up about 86% of the cost of the total premium. With Anthem, it appears it jumps up to 87 or 88% of total cost. Do we not have a set, like 80-20, if whatever the premium is, county pick up 80%, 20% goes to employee? Do we not have that in place currently? Or is it strictly by just cost?
There was a number that the board was meeting some years back, and I forget. See if it's up there. It's not on there. You might need to pan down, Jim, but had the number that the employee shared and then the county picked up, and when the cost of insurance went up, the board tried to absorb that as much as it could. So we're just hitting a number. It wasn't a percentage.
Yeah, I don't have that number on this illustration, Spencer, but I can get it for you. What the current numbers are, but we've adjusted that number year over year depending on the renewal.
I mean that's very good on the county's behalf, but I really think we need to have in place a set percentage for a cost share, whether it be 85-15, 80-20, 75-25.
Well, we were paying the individual share, right?
Excuse me?
The individual share was the amount we were paying. Look at Vicky, she's shaking her head, yeah.
Okay.
Please talk into your mics. It's hard to hear.
Sorry. Before we got the high deductible plan, the county was paying 100% of the employee, which was $565. And that's about where the number falls in. We pay $563 right now for that $1,000 plan, which comes out to about 80, almost 85.
Now I get what you were saying. We were paying the individual share on the high
100%.
deductible.
Any other questions? Comments?
Maybe it's a question. What are we saving the employee and going to Cigna or?
I think that was the Supervisor McDaniel's point there. It was straight across the board. It was an upward number straight across the board at 340, 236. So in that particular case, even if we went to Cigna, as it's shown here before any adjustment, it's actually an increase in cost. So, the board would need to determine if there is savings, whether you're going to divide that up with the employee, go to a straight.
I guess at the end of the year, if you had money saved, then you could use that to make adjustments to next year.
Yeah. So Spencer, I'll just jump in a second. I think that, when we get the local choice renewal and we can fine tune these numbers based on final financial illustrations. Obviously, we can make any adjustments to the contribution strategy that you have. We can do anything you want if there's a desire to, try to shift some additional cost off of the employee, or however you want to do it. We can do that modeling. I think this conversation we've been having for a couple of years is really focused on putting the county in a position so that we can avoid future increases of 5, 10, 15%, which really is consistent with lots of your neighbors, as well as lots of groups in the private sector. And being self-funded, to the point that I think was just being made, in years that we run well, we'll build up a surplus and we'll have money to A, fund future claims, and B, potentially allocate back to the employees in a way that can create value for them. And that could be more HSA contribution, that could be lower premiums, lower family premiums. But until we can accumulate some of that surplus and put ourselves in a position to do so, we're going to be very limited in what we can do in future years.
And if we move to Anthem or Cigna, the pool will just be county employees.
That's correct.
So if you have one large claim, it could skew your numbers for the following year, correct? Versus if you're in local choice, you're swimming a much larger pool, right?
David, the way I would look at it is, yes, you, in terms of the collective, you aren't sharing with other people, so you have a much smaller pool than you do at local choice. But we still have reinsurance protection, i.e. for any individual claimant, the stop loss protection stops at $100,000. So any claim that hits that point will be covered under reinsurance, and the county's protected. And obviously we're protected in aggregate. When we look back at the large claim data, you don't have a lot of claims year over year that have historically exceeded $100,000. Some of that's projected in this claim data. At $1.8 million, you have a lot of room to absorb what is to be expected as a number of large claimants. So, the answer is yes, you're standing alone. You're not in a big pool to help you absorb claims, but you do have protection at $100,000 for any individual claimant. And again, I think that if we look at the historical claim data, it certainly would indicate that if we continue on that trend, standing on your own gives you the ability to capture all the margin that local choice is capturing today.
And are there any neighboring localities or other governing bodies, i.e. the schools, that it would make sense to join with to increase our pool size?
I would say at this time, probably not, at least with the schools. They have some claim scenarios that within the next couple of years, I think will play out and make that situation something that we should look at and consider at that time. But you have a number of neighbors who have already made, Botetourt and others who have already gone down this path, and it is working well for them. So, I think that is certainly, again, an ongoing consideration, looking at the county and potentially the city. What I know about them today, as I say, it wouldn't factor in positively for the county today, but in the next year or two, it could be a different picture.
So no action is specifically requested here, as this is a work session, but we just wanted to get feedback on where the board would like to head. If you want more information, if we continue on this course and then see what local choice comes in with. We've done, I say we, Heidi and Steve and One Digital has done a lot of work on this to get us to this point. We're much farther ahead in the cycle than we were last year this time, which is what we intended to do.
Okay, well, I think personally, I like more information and especially when we get some solid numbers. Middle of the month.
I would as well, but I would also like more information on the buyout and what that might mean for us.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing with that, just being very candid, is, and I refer to it as the golden handcuffs, as I shared with the leadership group. On your decision, whatever you make, will be for July 1, 2021 effective. Anthem is, their local choice is not going to release to you whatever that number is, nor tell you how it's calculated until probably late September, 2 months after.
But surely we have some historical data that would tell us what the range are we talking? I mean, how much can they conceivably charge us?
I'll put on my list. I think part of this ongoing conversation, if it looks like we're moving in that direction, would probably be to work with the senior leadership and get on the phone with local choice and try to talk that issue through. Again, when I look at the last 3 years of claims history, I have no doubt that Rockbridge County has been subsidizing the local choice pool. Your dollars have been helping other people. We know for a fact that the local choice pool, this renewal period that we're getting into now, a lot of people are going to get decreases based on the fact that the pool has been very profitable. So I think those two combined, and I discussed this with our head underwriter, we both are in agreement that my expectation would be it wouldn't cost the county anything to get out. But that's something that we probably need to have a further discussion with the local choice leadership as we get a little bit further down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we determine how much money we have to set aside if we go this route?
Well, we do that for you. So we'll look at the total expected liability, and then working with the leadership, we'll decide at what level we want to budget. The costs that I'm showing you here are expected and maximum. Some people tend, it's very infrequent that clients will budget at the max liability, but you might want to budget 6-7% above the expected. And then we would calculate fee that you would use to bill county and the employees. And then we would collect that money on a monthly basis into the bank account and use that to fund our fixed expenses as well as our variable claims. So we would calculate all that for you prior to, and set up a budget. And then we would provide monthly budget reporting back to the county as to how you're running against that budget month over month.
I was a little bit confused earlier today. The ACA reporting,
Yes.
is that responsibility on the county? Who will do
The
that?
ACA reporting is the year-end 1095 reporting that's required. I'm sorry?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just saying that the 1095 report, the 95 reporting, the ACA reporting is actually what companies are doing now for the 2020 year. And that is currently something that is provided by local choice. If we go on our own, that's not something obviously they'll continue to provide. We will have to outsource that. And we've built into the budget an annual expense of about $5,500, which is pretty typical based on the group size to do that outsourcing. But that's completely separate from the overall medical budget.
Was that the $5,500?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions? Okay, Jim, we appreciate your presentation. Heidi or Steve, you have any concerns or comments? Okay. All righty, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you too.
All right, Spencer, can we move on to the county decal discussion?
We can. So over the years, on multiple occasions, the board has considered elimination of the decal purchase requirement. And Ms. Huffman has issued at least 5 reports over the years dating back to the mid-2000s. The most recent was in December 2018. No action was taken. There has been no change to the decal requirement, even though there was a short-term change in the type of decal that was issued. Staff and the Commissioner of Revenue, David Weitzel, and County Treasurer Betty Travato have met recently to discuss these options again. And just going through it historically, to our understanding, the primary purpose of requiring residents to purchase county decals was to provide a source of revenue where each resident vehicle owner was charged a flat rate on vehicles being used by the owner. Additional benefits included a way to enforce payment of personal property taxes and the ability to quickly identify that a resident, or somebody was a resident of the county, and that's primarily due to waste collection at the centers and at the landfill. So over time, there's been an increased ability to share information between our offices and Department of Motor Vehicles, and Ms. Travato has a tool to help with collection of taxes. Fact remains, for the foreseeable future, we are going to need some way to identify county residents at collection sites, whether they be unstaffed dumpsters or at staff centers and also at the landfill. And also the county has in its budget $535,000 in revenues budgeted for this purpose. And right now, decal notices are sent to residents in March each year, and the purchases are due by April 15th. And the board at the last meeting determined to ask staff to come forward with resolution at this meeting, which is on your regular agenda, to extend that display date until June 30th of this year. Not all decals registered in the county have a decal. Some residents have multiple vehicles, whether sitting in garages or whatever, that they don't plan to put on roads, so they don't buy decals for those. So issues that have, with the current system that have come forward, or from a resident's position, the annual inconvenience of procuring a decal, coming in here, mailing in the money and getting the decal back, and difficulty in removing old decals annually. And from the county's position, there's annual task of billing, tracking, and enforcing the decal program. And then the cost of the program, there is some staff time and cost of materials and postage. And so we're looking at a way to maintain current levels of revenue, to provide the ability to quickly identify county residents at these service locations, and reduce the amount of time and money expended by residents and staff in maintaining compliance. So there's a suggestion in your package that we came up with. I'll just briefly review it. First, the replacement of revenue that could come in various forms, from budget reductions to other taxes, whether it be a combination of personal property, real estate, fees, or a new tax. We're talking about emissions and cigarette tax. And the steps to implement that would, first of all, the first thing is to extend the decal deadline, and that's on the agenda, as I said, here in a little bit. And then in February-ish, consider and determine whether or not to utilize a permanent decal or window sticker to identify vehicles owned by residents. And that would be in the form of an ordinance. It is allowable. There are 2 options under state code for display of stickers, if you will. One of them goes exactly where the current decal is, and the other one is available to be placed in the blind spot up behind the mirror, your rear view mirror. And so then, in lieu of annual decal purchase notice that's sent to vehicle owners, Ms. Travato and her staff would send a one-time no-fee decal or sticker to be applied to windshields by June 30th, 2021. After sending out the initial batch, Ms. Travato would transfer administration of that to the Commissioner of Revenue's office, Mr. Weitzel. He would then provide each new vehicle registrant or registered with a no-fee permanent decal or sticker. In other words, if somebody goes and buys a vehicle, they would get a permanent sticker at no cost from Commissioner's office. And that would also be if stickers are damaged or if they are, just become old, they could get another decal. And then again, in March, April, through the budget process, the county could consider and implement alternative sources of revenue or budget cuts to make up the difference, combination of those things. So a couple things to consider if the board was moving in this direction, we would need to coordinate with the towns of Glasgow and Goshen, which currently require decal purchase. Should they wish to follow suit, they could issue a similar permanent decal of some sort. So that's what we have come up with, and wanted to run it by you all. Ms. Huffman has developed multiple ordinances over time that could allow for this type of action. We just need to know if the board wants us to bring it back at a future meeting to discuss a permanent decal. And as you can see, Mr. Rado and Mr. Whitesell are in attendance to help answer any questions you might have. And Ms. Huffman, who spent more time on this than anybody.
Is it going to put a lot of extra work on the treasurer and commissioner of revenue?
And if you're not going to be able to be heard unless you come up. Remotely, anyway.
No, we can do it with the staff I have. The only thing that might increase, and I just thought about this just now, I met with Spencer and Steve this morning with my budget, is postage for the folks who, especially during this time, and it's increased quite a bit with COVID, instead of coming in to report a vehicle to us, they call in. So if there's no need for them to come in and get the decal like they normally do from the treasurer's office to pay for it, then we're going to have some extra postage and sending those out. But the workload that's no problem.
Can I ask a question? So by getting rid of this, do we have a reduction in staffing? Would there be a reduction in staffing because we've gotten rid of the decals or the, annual decals?
Not in my office.
No, it's about a 1 month, 6-week process annually, and it's a lot of foot traffic and a lot of work in the treasurer's office. But I don't foresee how it would equate to a reduction in staffing there. I think the way we were looking at it is they could spend their time better in seeking outstanding revenues. We're a pretty good collection rate. It averages about 95% annually. And that time could be spent on other tasks.
Could we increase the personal property tax to make up for the loss of revenue from the decals?
That's an option, but I don't think it's a fair one.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is the percentage is based off the vehicle value. You could have someone whose vehicle is $10,000 and they may only pay an additional $15. You could have someone with a $50,000 vehicle and they may pay $45. So I don't think it's fair compared to right now, everybody pays the same cost for a decal.
We
Well,
couldn't
I
just
mean,
add
for some-
$25 to cost the person property.
I looked at that, Mr. Lyons, when we talked about this 2 years ago. And what ends up happening, if I think it was 25 cents or so, we'd have to increase the tax then to make up the revenue on the vehicles we had logged in at that time, the value of them. What happens is that the $25 across the board fee that you and I pay for a decal, if you have $1,000 value vehicle and we up the tax rate 25 cents to make up for the loss in revenue for the decal, then certainly you're going to be paying less than $25 because you no longer have to get that decal. But if my vehicle is valued at $20,000, then I'm going to be paying probably more than the normal $25 I'd have been paying. So there's some unfairness to it by raising the tax rate to make up for that loss. You're going to have people with the lower value vehicles that are going to save money, and then you're going to have the folks with the newer vehicles that are going to end up paying more than they would have if they had bought 2 decals.
But we can't just add $25 to everyone's personal.
There is authority to eliminate the decal itself, but still charge the decal fee. It would be a separate item. You can bill it on the personal property tax bill, but it still has to be designated as a decal fee, not just a flat sum added on top of personal property taxes.
And the problem you come into there is if you have a vehicle that's not on the road, then you don't have to buy a decal for it. But if the treasurer or however we attach that $25 decal fee to that tax bill, then we're putting a workload in my office that I don't want, because Bob's got 3 vehicles and only 2 of them are on the road. He goes across the hall when he comes into the treasurer's office to pay that bill, and he tells them, I'm not paying this 25 because it's not on the road. Then he has to come across and stand in line at my office, and we have to take 5 to 10 minutes to make the abatement of that $25 because that vehicle is not on the road at the time. We're still taxing it, still a taxable item. But because it's not on the road, then the requirement for the decal or the decal fee is not there. So in that case, you're taking the workload off the treasurer, which is fine, but you're increasing it on my side of it. And that was my gripe 2 years ago when we talked about doing that.
And one final time I'll ask, but aren't you already doing that within the current system with the decals? Aren't
Because
citizens
she
already
sends you out a list March 1st,
coming?
listing all your vehicles that are on your tax roll.
Yeah.
And the cost of a $25 decal for each one. That's not a bill. You bring that into her office and you tell her which ones you want a decal for.
Right, but that's what's happening today.
That's what happens today, but it doesn't affect, you don't have to come see me to get that $25 fee removed because it's not a bill. You're not being billed for it. You have the choice of either buying all those decals.
But they should be coming across to see you because they should have that
Right.
that vehicle. What's the word? Coded properly. No.
No, because I don't code them for decals. If you've got a title to a vehicle, then I'm gonna tax you.
Right.
I don't care if it's on the road, if it's sitting in the barn and hadn't seen the road for 10 years. As long as you've got an active title for that vehicle, it's a taxable item. So she takes my tax roll, and that's what she creates her decal notice from. So she's pulling all those vehicles from my roll and sending out that notice. And each one of them, and it is confusing to some people because they think my mother gets one and she's got a vehicle, a trailer on there that she doesn't need a decal for, but it's on her notice. So when she writes the $75 check and has me bring it in, Mommy, you need $50 because you're not buying a decal for the trailer. It's not required. So no, the way it's set up now is there's no adjustment. You don't have to come see me if you're not buying the decal. But if you put this fee on there, then that's a bill. And for the folks who then when she goes to pay her personal property tax, I have to take that bill and abate off that $25 fee for that trailer because she doesn't need a decal. And then I'm gonna come ask for help.
Well, do y'all have a suggestion on a way to do it?
I'm sorry,
Do you have a suggestion for us on the best way to do it?
admissions tax.
I didn't realize we were looking at the admissions tax to actually replace an existing tax we already have. I thought we were looking at an admissions tax to help pay for some things that we thought that we found, needed, like an, economic director. So that's my confusion, that I never understood that we, or it has not been conveyed to me, that we were looking to get rid of this tax and replace it with others.
I don't think you're confused.
Well, okay, good, Bob. I'm glad to hear that.
No, that was, he
The
asked for a
other-
suggestion. That was just my suggestion. You know,
Okay, well,
when we
well,
look at the-
no, I mean, it's now, I've heard it a couple of times, not just from you. So it is not my intention that, inconvenient as it is, our citizens are used to this tax. It's something that they do, and we don't have to convince them to do. I think it is, for some people, it's considered fair. If you want to get rid of this particular method of taxing, I do like adding to the personal property. And I don't think it's fair if you consider that for some people, they need a car to go to work where they're making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year, paying less for that decal, that permanent decal, is fine with me. In fact, I think it's perfectly fair. I don't mind if I have an expensive new car to pay more on my end of that. That's just me. And I think that if we wanted to look there, I personally am not interested in losing revenue at this time. I'm not interested in giving up revenue and then replacing it with admissions or with the cigarette tax. Just me. The other thing, I absolutely need, especially in my district, we have a terrible time with the trash. And we need the ability to give tickets to people that come in and use our dumpsters, our open dumpsters. So until the issue of our open dumpsters are taken care of, I just absolutely can't see not having a decal. And if the permanent decal works for that, okay. So those are my comments.
I think it's important to remember that 85% of the jurisdictions in this state, if not more, don't have a decal. It's just unfathomable to me that we're still doing this antiquated process, and there has to be some way that is a best method of achieving this. So those are the kinds of things that I
don't
want.
mind as long as we take care of our dumpsters, and maybe that 85% doesn't have open dumpsters where other localities can easily come and load their trash in it, overburden us in that way. So, once we take care of that, I don't have any objection to what you're asking for, Jay, as long as we don't lose revenue. And we just do it in a different way, because 535, if we put it on our property taxes, that is 2 cents on the property tax.
I would consider it already a property tax. I mean, it's not like it's a different tax. It's a
well,
tax.
I think it will be
that's how I feel
perceived differently. I think it will definitely be perceived differently. If we say we're going to get rid of this decal, but you're going to be paying 2 cents more on your property taxes. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people won't perceive it. Maybe they'll understand. And in terms of being fair, I'm not sure that that's fair, because there are plenty of people that rent in our community that, okay, the one way they contribute is to paying the decal on their cars. If you get rid of that, load it on the property tax, then how are the people that might be renting a house contributing? Just
Mr. Votto?
I had mentioned to the commissioner at one point about all of the items that are currently in the personal property tax file, and the fact that not everything buys a decal. So if we took that most expensive vehicle that would get a decal, raise the tax enough to make it $25, The lower things obviously would pay lower, but the things that bought 0 decals would be paying higher. Boats are in personal property. They don't buy a decal. But if you raise the personal property tax, boats pay a little bit more. So overall, it might balance out, and all of your different revenue doesn't have to come from that one place. It could also be a penny on the real estate, and then this theory with the personal property. Just a thought.
All right. Well, I appreciate your thought.
Thank you.
Appreciate both you and everything you do. And if we move forward, we want to try to do it without burdening either one of your offices, because I know y'all are very busy. Any other comments?
I really wonder why we're even visiting this. It would be like taking away your paycheck, but now you figure out how you're going to get paid or compensated. We all know that if you do away with the tax against an individual, it's hard if you could ever put that tax back. I don't see the admissions tax nor the cigarette tax being used to offset county tax. I see expenses in the future coming up with other items that we'll probably need the cigarette tax and admission tax to use to pay for it. If we do away with the county tax, we're going to still turn around and issue the people a tag so that they can go to the dumpster site. And I can't see us even visiting changing from something that's working that citizens aren't really complaining about. But if you take it away and start taxing some other way, I expect we'll hear some complaints.
I mean, I definitely feel citizens are complaining about it. That's one of the reasons that I've been talking about it for years.
Mr. Chairman, I know we're up against the clock. Could we possibly revisit this at the next meeting or at your designated time in another work session? Because I do think there are some issues that we need to discuss amongst us.
Right, we absolutely can, but we will, in the regular meeting tonight, need to extend the deadline, or else it's a moot point. So we're far from being finished with the discussion, but that'll be the reason we need to extend the deadline for this year till, I think it's June 30.
And given the existing circumstances, I don't see no reason why we wouldn't do that, to extend deadlines for all of the taxes we may be collecting. If I may, just one or two quick questions. I think, and this is just something to be thinking about for the next time we visit this. It seems to me that the very first question that needs to be answered is, are we going to make up the amount of lost revenue? Because you could just decrease expenses to account for this. So that's your first question. The second question is, what is the exact amount of lost revenue? Because I know we budget 535, but there are some expenses in there, whether it's the cost of the decals, whether it's the cost of 4 to 6 weeks of a person's salary in the treasurer's office or whatnot. There are some expenses in that. So I don't think 535 is the exact amount that you would lose. I don't know what that amount is, but I would like for our staff to be able to provide us some number there so we know exactly what we're looking at. And then, then the next question is, if you are not going to cut expenses to account for this, how are you going to make it up? So those are the questions I think we all need to be thinking about for the next time we visit it.
Any other comments? Thank you all for coming, and we'll close this work session and give everybody a chance to stand up and stretch, and then start our meeting in about a minute.
Who is, who's working? Personnel committee. Sure. I mean, it's one digital meeting with personnel committee, or they just meet with you? Okay. I mean, one of the whoever, one of the things I would like to look at is max percentage county. I mean, in my mind, it probably should be 80% and the other 20%, no matter what the premium increase is. I realize that may have to be adjusted in how much we pay. I mean, I'm okay paying the high deductible for a single person. That means the $1,000 premium may go up more than what it normally would.
What Bob was saying is right. What we have used is what does a single person on their own, where's the cost? So the zero cost is what that's.
But that should be just the high deductible. That shouldn't be the other 1,000. So a single person getting $1,000 plan should have some out-of-pocket expense.
That's where
Like I said, I don't mind a single person high deductible. Every other cost should be passed along to get to that 80/20 or whatever it is.
You're just gonna have to probably phase it in to the sticker shock. How much we pay.
Yeah.
No, disagree with that. Just saying
Yeah.
we can't do it in 1 year. I would.
Ultimately, the cost of the insurance is on the employee. If you don't have any claims, your insurance will go up.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean that to sound rude, but that's just.
I don't disagree. If we're paying, let's say we're paying 5% now, you can't, make sure we're paying 20. Make sure you're paying 10. Not sure if you round everybody up. We can't not. We've got to figure a way to generate what we lost. We can't be admitting for cigarettes. That's crazy.
You know, one of the things I'd like to see is, like when you go on, they give you a placard tag on your room. That is what I would like, and I'd like to see it have like for me, it should have 2015 Ford F-150 red, like or something to identify you. So you can't, I can't give you mine to use. You can, and maybe I should have to buy that $25, and I keep it as long as I keep that vehicle. When I change vehicles, I come in, I buy a new one. If I lose it, if it gets tore up, I come in, I buy a new one. It's on me to take care of that placard for as long as.
Now, what if you don't use the landfill or recycle? Everyone still has to purchase it. It's just one time.
For as long as it's still
Right.
readable.
Right, but then you have to figure out how to make that also yearly. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order, January 25th, Board of Supervisors. Randy, you take roll, please.
Sure. Supervisor Lewis,
President.
Supervisor Day,
Here.
Supervisor McDaniel,
Here.
Supervisor Ayers,
Here,
Chairman Lyons.
Here, and we'll now have an invocation followed by the pledge.
Got it.
Mr. Lewis.
Let's pray in thanksgiving for this beautiful day that the Lord has made, for the privilege of gathering together as free citizens, for our friends Charles Colonel Sandridge, Bob Funkhauser, and Jen Moore, for wisdom and calm in finding solutions to our many opportunities, and for all the blessings bestowed upon us to live and work and lead in this special place.
We pray in your Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the room will be open to the public due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 10 attendees other than county staff will be allowed into the room at one time. For the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Executive Order 63, all persons over the age of 5 that do not have precluding medical conditions are asked to wear a face covering. We'll hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting. There are several public hearings that'll start at 6 p.m. We'll do our best to take citizen comments remotely. There are 2 options for citizens to offer comment. To join by telephone, you may dial in one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you'll use the raise your hand feature. You can press raise your hand button on the bottom of the Zoom window or *9 if you are calling in by phone. Are there any changes to the agenda? Very good. And we have no recognitions tonight. So we are ready for citizens' comments. We have no one in person. Do we have any remote?
There is no one with a raised hand or who's left a chat message.
All right, thank you. Then we'll move on. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our January 11th meeting? There was one correction. We had 2 Horse Center appointees and one should have been the Chamber of Commerce. So the corrected minutes are in. Were there any other corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
All right, a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. All right, Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis, Ms. Ayers,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. Consideration of the school appropriation resolution.
Okay, if you go to your board docs package, you'll see an appropriation resolution for a school CIP project that was a carryover from last year. It's an additional $50,300 for the practice field that's at Maury River Middle School that's been upgraded. And the school board met 2 weeks ago. They approved a similar appropriation. On our side, if the board approves this in a couple of weeks, we'll bring this to appropriate on the general fund side, the transfer to the school fund for operations. So if there's no questions, the staff's recommendation is to approve the appropriation resolution as presented.
Are there any questions?
Is this coming from general fund or would it be coming from the school escrow fund?
This is coming from the school carryover account that sits in the general fund. Yes, sir.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
second,
And a second. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
yes,
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, discussion of the admissions tax.
Yes. As you're aware, the board approved a 10% admissions tax effective for most of the month of August. And as a result of discussions with businesses and nonprofits, ultimately rescinded the tax with the instruction to revisit in the future. Since then, Supervisors McDaniel and Lewis have met with business owners Mark Klein and Executive Director of Lime Kiln Spencer McElroy to discuss their concerns in more depth. And it's important to note that they don't necessarily represent the the business community, the impacted business community, although Mr. Klein has had multiple conversations. Mr. McElroy is representing Lime Kiln in his discussions, not the full slate of 501c3s. So after receiving their feedback in November, Supervisors McDaniel and Lewis proffered a proposal which would implement the full 10% tax over 3 years, beginning with 3% in January 2022, another 3 in January 2023, and then the remaining 4 in January 2024. The proposed ordinance includes the exemptions of for attendance at public school, public and private elementary, secondary, and college school, college or school-sponsored events, including events sponsored by the school or recognized student organizations, and also admissions charged to participants in order to participate in sporting events. Oh, yeah. It also, I'm sorry, Ms. Huffman just reminded me, I was getting to that here in a little bit. It's also, the ordinance also includes a $3 maximum cap, not to exceed $3 from the tax. So determinations of whether or not the tax applies to a specific event, series of events, or business is under the purview of the Commissioner of the Revenue. Ultimately, the Commissioner of Revenue would need to field any questions of Mr. Weitzel. Supervisor McDaniel and I met with Mr. Klein, Mr. McElroy last week to further discuss, and as a result of that meeting, they did have several concerns. One of them was the level of the cap, and again, it's currently proposed at $3. They thought that was a bit high. Inclusion, the second one is inclusion of nonprofits. Both gentlemen preferred exclusion of nonprofits. And then question about the use of the proceeds. There was a question as to what the proceeds would go toward. And of course, you provided there in your board package with some estimates, but there's so many variables until we would get we'd want to budget very conservatively until we get a year under our belt if the board did choose to implement this. And as I said, Ms. Huffman provided a draft ordinance for your consideration, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. And then also the Finance Committee, if there's anything I've missed or anything you'd like to add. Cover?
No, I think you covered it well. Like I say, we, Supervisor Lewis and myself, we met with Mr. Klein and Mr. McElroy back in the fall. Had a very good discussion, detailed, around their thoughts and feelings and whatnot. And we heard from the community, last summer, about it as well. And we tried to implement what we thought would be fair. Both gentlemen that we met with, like I say, Mr. Suter and myself last week, asked that we bring these 3 issues to the full board to be discussed. I made sure I told them that I felt it would be best for them to do during public comment. And if we decide to move towards a public hearing on this particular subject, I would hope that all people electronically or however post their comments and make the board aware.
I'd like to add the only other thing that hasn't been said in the research and all the work that we've done. A couple of things. One, some ideas from the committee have been incorporated in this new proposal. And but in regards to the cap, Ms. Huffman has done some research, and through her research, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood you to say that there's only one jurisdiction that has a cap.
Only one that I could find. It was
Yeah, so
City
I mean,
of Alexandria that had a 50-cent cap, and that is.
You didn't call every single one, but your professional research capabilities came with that. So it's not even common. It doesn't seem to be But I don't think it's an unreasonable request, and it makes logical sense to me. So that's why, we included it.
I don't see too many $100 tickets around here to get into something. So you'd have to be paying $100 for admission before you'd reach that 3%, $3 cap, if my math is correct.
No, well, once you're on, the $3 cap is regardless of is it 3%, 6%, or 10%.
Right.
So 10% on a $100 ticket could conceivably be a $10 tax.
So we're talking,
but we're capping it at 3. So
right, and we're talking with how many
The
years?
first year,
The first year we're just at 3%.
right.
So I don't see where unless I'm just not in the right circles, I don't see where.
I don't think it's going to be an issue for most
Right.
businesses, but.
And also, during our discussions, this is the presentation that Mr. Lewis and myself are making to the full board. That doesn't preclude any future boards from changing. Future boards could lower it, could raise it, could change the cap, could do, anything they so desired at that point in time. I made that clear when we were having discussions as well.
So if that's the case, why would we be considering year 2 and year 3? Why wouldn't we just be considering year 1 and see how that goes? And so the proposal is by year 3, we get to the maximum amount that we can charge admissions. Correct?
That is correct.
That's your recommendation.
Yeah,
So,
and the reason for that is just to give a plan for the board to pursue. And
Okay.
again, if the board decides that that's not the objective they want to, that's a full board decision. This is just a proposal designed to bring forward.
Right. And so in the communications with the nonprofits, or the Spencer McElroy, for instance, so their proposal is to not tax nonprofits. So Lime Kiln, for instance, wouldn't be taxed under that proposal. Not under your proposal, but under their view of how it should be done.
Yes, we didn't ask for a proposal from them. We just let them know what the proposal we were bringing forward. And once we discussed that with them, his idea was that should be something that we consider or discuss, whether nonprofits should be included or not.
And also needs to be mentioned that Mr. McElroy is the executive director, but he is not the board. And my understanding is that the board is not averse to an admissions tax to help in the community.
Okay. Have we had any contact with the theater?
Drive-in?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the drive-in, yes. Any communications with them?
No, not since the original discussions back in August.
So did the committee reach out to them? Did they just decide not to engage, or?
They must have chosen not to engage because they were here when we decided how we were going to proceed with this.
They were invited. At
the original time, yes.
Yeah.
So you reached out to all the people that spoke in the committee to meet with them?
No, we told them when they were here, when we set the plan go forward, as best I know, that we advised them how we were going to proceed, and they were welcome to engage.
And we encouraged them to engage. And if I remember correctly, I told them if they couldn't participate and wanted to contact Mark Klein with their thoughts, then he could represent them. But we tried to involve all the businesses.
I'm just, it's not a criticism, I thank the committee for doing the work. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to figure out how many people were engaged, how many people reached out, of the people that we heard from. So
So we still have to have a public hearing on before we can adopt this ordinance.
Yes.
So the purpose now is to decide on whether we're going to have the public hearing. Is that correct?
I think it's, that's part of it. I think also, for the board to get a first look at this and
Right.
decide, is this what you want to have the public hearing on, or is there changes you want to make?
One question. Was this discussed with the Commissioner of Revenue? Was he all right with,
He was in, one of the meetings back in the fall. I can't remember. Was that when the first meeting when we had with Mr. McElroy and Mr. Klein?
I believe so. Yeah, yes. He's aware. Yes, Bob.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say he's aware and understands the concept and has been engaged in discussion.
I would also say I have had a conversation with Mr. Weitzel, and the fact that you've got some planning, some lead time is appreciated. Because it does take, every time it changes, it's work in his office and it's work by the businesses.
Well, I think the committee did a great job. I think public had their opportunity to participate in the committee. I think you've presented a very reasonable plan. Everyone will have 11 months notice that something's going to happen if we approve it. I like the idea of a cap because I think when it eventually gets to 10%, there are some concerts and whatnot that'll would be way above the $3. And then and I think even with the nonprofits, a lot of those people that attend or go to those events are not from the area, and they are taking advantage of a lot of our services while they're here. And I think we're being very reasonable. And I would encourage us moving forward with a public hearing.
for the company to take action?
And one of the things I think that I think Mr. Lewis had discussed before, and I do think it's important, is that while this concept wasn't necessarily open to counties in the past, the state made it open as a means to make up for lost revenue from the state. So I think it's important to keep in mind.
Comments? I have a motion to move forward to a public hearing on this.
So moved.
We have a second.
I'll second it. I mean, being that Mr. Lewis and I were both on the committee, I don't know that's exactly right, but I think we need to have a discussion on it, and public needs to have an opportunity to have their voices heard as well.
Okay. Any other discussion right now?
Just, Mr. McDaniel, we implemented it once before, there has been discussion. I don't feel like there hasn't been a chance for input.
No, but this is a new idea, new phase in.
Yes.
But before,
Not conceptually different in the ultimate,
Right.
except for the cap,
And that's why
Right.
you have to have the public
which I
hearing.
think is important.
Right. and that's why you
But
have
we
to-
do require a public hearing, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
so by definition, we're going to have public input. So that's.
Right. Right. Okay. I have a motion and a second. Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel.
yes,
Ms. Ayers.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all. Consideration of a resolution to extend the county decal deadline.
this is to June 30th.
Yes, to June 30th.
From April 15th to June 30.
Motion.
The resolution is attached. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a
Second.
second? Any discussion on it? Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Appointments. We have 3. The Agricultural and Forestal Districts Advisory Committee, 3-year terms, currently expires on the 12th. All members are willing to continue service except for Ms. Heiser, who would like to step off. An application from county resident Scott Hanna has been submitted for your consideration to replace Ms. Heiser. I've known Scott Hanna for years. He's a very good person. I would hope the board would support him.
Mr. Chairman, I was the one that discussed it with Mr. Hanna. I've known Mr. Hanna for a very long time, and he's a landowner in our community. He happens to be in Miss Ayers' district, but I just happen to have known him for probably 35 or 40 years. So I feel his knowledge and sense of responsibility to the community and all would be invaluable on that particular committee.
I concur. So is that a motion to approve?
So moved.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I second.
Okay, 2 seconds. So we're
Oh,
great.
sorry. I apologize.
All right. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Ms. Huffman, can I vote for myself? Oh, this is just Hannah.
Yeah, this is just Anna. Everyone else is a group.
Aye.
And the chair votes yes.
I do think you probably
So-
need a vote on the slate.
Then we have, but I thought we should vote for Mr. Hannah separate. And now we'll vote for the returning members. Do we have a list? Other than Jay Lewis? We know that's one.
That's right.
Oh, man, not off the top of my head. I don't
Yeah,
have.
they're,
Tony
it's in the
Brown, Richard
packet.
Clemmer,
Okay.
Mr. Dave could enlighten me.
Hunter McClung, John Hauser, Bernard Watts, David, AUPSHA, and the Commissioner of Revenue.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. And we still have no one from Glasgow?
We do not.
Okay, so we will.
Have
keep
you had
working on it.
discussions with Mayor Watts on that?
I have.
Okay.
Building code.
Do we need to bring that back every month? Or is there a desire to bring that back every month?
Well,
Until such time as,
I just wanted to let everyone know we still don't have.
The reason I put it on there is in case I get a recommendation,
then okay.
then I've got, it's on the agenda for you.
And the Building Code Board of Appeals, we have John Hostetter, Cars Creek, and he submitted an application. I think he would be fine. And I'd like a motion to approve.
Was there any board member that actually spoke to him, or was it just an application received?
We've received an application. I know of him. Is that on Big Hill?
Motion to approve.
The motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Any discussion? Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You got 1 minute and we'll start the public hearings.
So that one's just everybody else reappointed. I just got it in the back of his book. If you need to see it.
I was just trying to
You've got
track
a
number
video link
9.
in the back of his book.
It's all good.
But we don't
I'm
need
good.
it. We're just FYI.
Well, you can add to that. No, we'll have to leave that. It charges us late.
I lost
That's why it's
the
raining.
car and the Jeep. Between them, and it snowed last night on our way out.
Yeah, okay. No, I was hoping it would be on top, so that they, so I say you can take that tax, put it in the fund. So they feel like they contribute to some of these. Maybe they could, maybe. All those athletic. I mean, you're talking millions. You can try that. If I'm traveling
Yeah, I think yes, sir.
Try to get some cool. But I just said,
I'm gonna call.
that car today. 4 or 5 times.
Because they pay.
Here we go.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We'll move into our public hearings. The first one is Douglas and Joanna Harris to amend an existing special exception permit for a kennel in an agricultural transition zone.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Stefan, if you could promote Joe Harris to attendee, I will get ready for my PowerPoint presentation. I do have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to share with y'all.
Joe Harris has been promoted.
Thank you. All right. The public hearing is for Douglas and Joanne Harris, an application for a special exception for a kennel in the agricultural transitional zoning district. Briefly review the surrounding zoning. The area zoning consists of gray across the road, which is industrial, general industrial, which of course is the VDOT headquarters. The light pink adjacent to this property is Virginia Horse Center, agricultural transitional. The purple in the rear is planned business. That's B2 zoning district. That's the Dominion offices and laydown yard. The Harris property is outlined in orange and is identified as tax map numbers 61-3-7. That's 0.756 acres per tax records. And then 61-3-8. And that consists of 0.561 acres per tax records. Douglas and Joanne Harris have made an application to amend existing special exception to associate with the kennel, with the existing kennel on 272 Alphen Lane, Lexington, Virginia, 24450. The property is located in the agricultural transitional zoning district, and per section 603B-03-4 of the land development regulations, commercial kennels are used by special exception. Per section 302-116, a kennel is defined as any location where the raising, grooming, caring for, or boarding of dogs, cats, or other small animals for commercial purposes is carried on. The original special exception permit and associated conditions were approved by the Board of Supervisors on April 23rd, 2018. Conditions associated with the current special exception permit limit the use to dog grooming and dog training, with no more than 4 dogs allowed on the property at one time for grooming and not more than 2 dogs allowed on the property for training. The current conditions also prohibit overnight boarding and limit the hours of operation till 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. The purpose of this pending application is to amend the existing special exception permit to allow for overnight boarding of dogs and cats and to increase the number and type of animals permitted on the property. Per the written description of plans, the Harrises would like the ability to provide overnight boarding of dogs and cats and increase the number of dogs and expand their services to include cats to a total of 6 dogs and or cats for grooming and training at one time. They would also like to add overnight boarding for dogs and cats. So the Planning Commission on January 13th, 2021, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the application with the following conditions. Number 1, the business shall be limiting to grooming, training, and overnight boarding for dogs and cats. Number 2, no more than a total of 5 dogs and or cats allowed on the property at one time for overnight boarding. Number 3, no more than a total of 6 dogs and or cats allowed on the property for at one time for grooming or training. And number 4, the hours of operation for the grooming and training services shall be limited to 8 p.m. With that, I'd like to stop sharing my screen and turn this portion of the present over to the applicant, Joanne Harris. Joanne, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we can hear you well, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Perfect. The only thing that I seen as you were going through your presentation, number 4, you said the hours of operation of grooming and training shall be limited till 8 p.m. We're actually just keeping that the same as 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. But other than that, everything else was correct. When we first originally were rezoned to be able to do the training and grooming on property, we were also doing our restaurant full-time. Now that we have sold the restaurant and I'm doing full-time here, I would like to be able to expand my business to boarding and also upping my numbers of animals I'm able to have on the property at one time. Is there any other questions?
Any questions?
I would only ask what is to be done with waste and wastewater if you're, during the boarding.
The building that we're building right now to be able to do the boarding is going straight to the city water. Right now with the grooming and stuff that I'm doing is hooked up to city as well. So I'm planning on keeping everything the exact same.
So it goes to sewage?
Correct.
So you rinse down the kennels, that water goes to the sewage system.
The inside kennels will be that way. The outside runs, the feces will be picked up to best ability, and then it will be sanitized and sprayed down.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Mr. Slayton, but I don't, is that now or?
Well, let's open for public comments and we'll ask Mr. Slayton. All right, we'll now open for public comments. Has anyone signed up? Is there anyone electronically to address the board?
I see no hands raised or any comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comment session. Mr. Lewis, you got a question for
Mr. Slayton, when the conditions of 2 and 3 say no more than a total of 5, but then it says and or cats or dogs. So could that mean 5 dogs and 5 cats?
No, sir. It means
so 5 animals.
Yeah, a total of 11 on the property at any given time. Yes, sir.
I love 11.
Because of 5 and 6. So there be no more than 5 dogs and or cats allowed on the property at one time for grooming and training. And then number 2, I went reverse there, no more than a total of 5 dogs and or cats allowed on the property at one time for overnight boarding. So there's five animals associated with the overnight boarding and 6 animals associated with grooming and training.
But if the grooming and training ends at 6 p.m., theoretically, there usually wouldn't be. The overnight boarding is just not overnight. That could be 24 hours then.
That is correct.
That's
Yes.
a good way to say it. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Were there any comments from people? It doesn't look like there would be any neighbors bothered by, associated noise like dog barking and that sort of thing. It looked like a good
We have-
location?
Yeah, we have spoken with our neighbors on both sides of us. Of course, Dominion and VDOT aren't going to have any issues, and nobody in the neighbor had any issues with anything.
Good, thank you.
Did you
Yes,
speak
ma'am.
with your neighbor across the street, across Alphen Lane?
Correct. Bernie, who owns the property right next to VDOT.
Just wanted to be clear. You said on either side of you, so I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, right. Across the street, and then next to us, Francis Straub. We have spoke with both of the neighbors.
And of course, just to piggyback on that conversation, part of the public hearing process is, of course, posting the property with zoning action pending signs, zoning action pending sign, I should say, ads in the newspaper and certified mail to all the adjoiners, including across the street.
I understand. It's even better just that
Yes, sir.
she was able to
Mhm.
correctly.
Yes, and I honestly think, you know, I'd always say that at the beginning, and I think that has helped this process.
Ms. Harris, if you did have a particularly noisy dog visiting,
Yes.
how do you deal with that problem within your kennel?
Like right now, I'm clearly not overnight, but if I have a loud dog, the dog is inside with me and not outside, so that I can, for training, of course, correct the behavior and reinforce positively the dog when it's acting properly. So hopefully if it is nervous or extra loud, it won't last very long. Of course, between us and the neighbors, there are a lot of trees and everything. So if there is any noise that carries, hopefully it will drown out. I know, being so close to Blue Ridge Animal Hospital, every once in a while we'll hear animals over there, but very rarely is it ever an issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions? Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the application?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes?
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Application's approved.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
A point of procedure for these things. As you know, I have an aversion to virtual anyway, but, and I don't know what Ms. Harris's conditions are, but are we, I mean, we couldn't even see her. Or do we have guidelines for this, or can we, the board, know about it beforehand so that we know how a public hearing is going to work now? Because it's not how it's traditionally ever been handled.
We do, and if someone wanted to make public comment as well, they can do it by phone in this process.
Okay.
That's all the, I guess, not disclaimers, but everything that chair reads at the beginning of the meeting.
And
Okay, well,
that'll be only until the executive order is lifted, and we'll go back to.
Understand.
Okay. All right, next, the Rockbridge Farmers Co-op, Yellow Rail Lane, application for an amendment to an existing special exception permit, propane storage facility in a general business zoning district.
Yes, and with us tonight representing the Farmers Co-op, it looks like we have Mr. Jason Black. So Stefan, if you could promote him. I believe that is the only one in attendance, but with that, let me do a short presentation.
Mr. Black has been promoted.
Great. All right. The second public hearing is for an application by the Rockbridge County Rockbridge Farmers Cooperative Incorporated, application for a special exception for a propane facility in the general business zone. Again, just to briefly review the area zoning map. The pink to the north of this property is agricultural transitional. That's the AT zone. The dark red is the general business B1 zone. The property is outlined, the co-op property is outlined in magenta in this case and is identified as tax map number 62-A-36 and consists of 4.424 acres per tax records. Mr. Wilson Whitmore, the general manager of the Rockbridge Farmers Cooperative Incorporated, 33 Yellow Rail Lane, Lexington, Virginia, 24450, has applied to amend existing special exception permit in order to add two 30,000-gallon storage tanks. The property is located in the general business zone, B1 zone, and per section 605.03-17 of the regulations, propane storage facility greater than 500 gallons is a use by special exception. The original special exception and associated with conditions were approved by the Board of Supervisors on June 23rd, 1997. Conditions associated with the current special exception permit, the one that's standing now, not the one that's pending, include a stagger road, required stagger road, double 5-foot white pines along the drive-in property line. That would of course be to the west. Security lighting directed down as to not impact the drive-in. The landscaping consistent with the corridor study as shown on the site plan prepared by Blackwell Engineer, but not intended to screen the front of the facility. This is the current application. The current application has been made to add two 30,000-gallon propane tanks to the site, adjacent just north of the existing propane tanks. A revised plan has been submitted with the special exception application. This slide here depicts that new plan. The plan shows the proposed location of two proposed propane tanks and the existing landscaping that's in place. The Planning Commission held their public hearing on January 13th, 2021, and has recommended approval of the application with the following conditions. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yep, recycled. I apologize. I'll keep it on this screen. The three conditions are: number one, substantial compliance with the plan prepared by Blackwell Engineering dated December 2020. That is the plan that was in your package. Number two, the fourth 30,000-gallon propane tank to be installed within 2 years of date of approval. With that one in particular, the current plans are only for one additional propane tank. And so with working with Mr. Blackwell, they stated that it was probably a pretty good idea if you had any future plans to add the fourth tank to go ahead and show it on the plan. In the special exception ordinance, there's some time limitations for implementing those. And we proposed working with the applicant to extend that to 2 years. So again, number two condition is the fourth 30,000-gallon propane tank to be installed within 2 years of the date of approval. And number three, final condition is existing landscaping to be maintained in a healthy condition. With that, I'd like to stop sharing my screen and turn the meeting over to Mr. Jason Black. And Mr. Black, if needed, I can certainly pull that site plan back up for discussion purposes. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes, we can hear you well. With that, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Wilson could not be here. He is having technical difficulties. So I'm not sure that I have anything to add. Does the board have any questions for me?
Any questions for Mr. Black?
No, sir.
Okay, then at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Has anyone signed up to speak? No? Is there anyone wanting to speak electronically?
I do not see any hands raised or comments.
Then we will close the public hearing. Does anyone have any questions for Chris?
So the plan is for two, but only one's going to be installed right now.
That is correct, yes. And then the second one would be.
Has 2 years.
Yes, sir.
Without having to come back through the process.
That is correct, yes, sir. And with talking with Mr. Whitmore, you know, he was anticipating that time frame. So obviously work with the landowner, you know, to draft that condition.
I'd like to commend the co-op for doing business in the county and for expanding the infrastructure that we desperately need. I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes,
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Application is approved. Thank you, Mr. Black.
Thank you.
And I find myself once again agreeing with Mr. Lewis. If they're going to do it electronically, we ought to require they at least have a camera so we can see who we're talking to.
The language in here, not parsing, but it relates to citizen comment, not necessarily public hearing presenters.
Right. All right, now the next public hearing is for the application for a special exempt permit to develop a private non-commercial landing strip in an agricultural and general uses A2 zoning district.
Yes, sir. The next public hearing we have is application by Mr. David Rayburn, application for a special exception for a private landing strip in the agricultural and general use district. That's the A2 zoning district. Briefly review the area zoning map, and this one's a little bit easier than the other ones. It's an agricultural zone and surrounded by an agricultural zone. That would be the agricultural and general use districts, A2 zoning districts. The property that the application is identified as tax map number 50-A-58 and consists of 163.339 acres per tax records. I will say, if you can see my arrow here, that parcel, the 163 acre parcel, consists of this parcel and this parcel with the railroad right of way that Mr. David Rayburn and his wife own. Split that tax parcel, actually somewhat unusual, but this map also shows the Rayburn owns adjacent tracts of land to the east that consist of approximately another 92.24 acres. Mr. David Rayburn, 665 Old Chapel Road, Fairfield, Virginia, has applied for a special exception permit to develop a private non-commercial landing strip on their property. The property is further identified as tax map number 50-A-58. The property is located in the agricultural and general use districts per section 603.03-4. Private non-commercial landing strips are used by special exception. The proposed landing strip is located on the western portion of the parcel, again identified as 50-A-58. They also own additional 92 acres to the east. As described in the written description of plans, the proposed landing strip is one way, meaning that the aircraft will land, then the aircraft will be turned around and take off in the same direction. The approach is from the east to the west, and then the aircraft will manually turn around and depart back to the east. The grass field outline is approximately 120 feet from the property line to the west, and the proposed landing strip is approximately 200 feet from that property line to the west. The distance from the edge of the proposed landing strip to the easternmost property line of the Rayburns is approximately 1 mile, meaning that the takeoff and landing will be over the Rayburn property. Mr. Rayburn has stated that the landing strip will be primarily utilized by one aircraft, but has requested that a permit includes permission for a second aircraft to land on the proposed landing strip. Per section 714.08, all proposed sites shall be reviewed by the Federal Aviation Administration, the Virginia Department of Aviation, and the Virginia Department of Transportation. And an email from Alton Jordan, Airport Engineer and Security Facilities, with the Department of Aviation, Virginia Department of Aviation. He states that, quote, per Code of Virginia 24 VAC 5-20-170, private airports or landing areas, the Department of Aviation only regulates registering and/or license of private landing areas, i.e. airports, heliports, and seaplane bases within the Commonwealth. We do not have jurisdiction to approve or deny aircraft operation. The airspace is regulated federally, and therefore final determination is fulfilled by an aeronautical study conducted by the FAA under provisions Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 157. He then goes on to say, final analysis is provided to the said owner as a notice of airport airspace analysis determination by the FFA. The last statement from Mr. Jordan states that based on my experience and brief review, I do not have any objection to the requested flight pattern or approach presented by Mr. Rayburn. The Department of Aviation will, however, yield to the final approval by the FAA, end quote. Any approvals at a local level would be contingent on FAA approval. Section 714.13 of the Rockbridge County Land Development Regulations state that the following factors may be considered in determining whether to issue a special exception permit for private landing strips. Number one, the number of expected users and aircraft and type of aircraft. Number two, flight paths. Number three, setbacks from property lines. Number four, proximities of landing strips to residential or historical structures and residential or historical district boundaries. Number five, nature of uses on adjacent and nearby properties. Number six, surrounding topography. Number seven, surrounding tree coverage and foliage. Number eight, design of the hangar and fuel storage area with particular reference to the design characteristics that have been effect to reducing or eliminating visual obtrusiveness or susceptibility to flooding. Number nine, proposed ingress and egress. Number 10, consistency with the comprehensive plan and purposes served by zoning. And number 11, final one, is length of the time frame permit. On January 13th, 2021, the Rockbridge County Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the application with the following conditions. These conditions are in addition to what's already regulated by the landing strip regulations in the county ordinance. So in addition to those existing conditions, the unique conditions placed on this permit, proposed to be placed on this permit, would be number one, no more than 2 planes are permitted on the ground at any given time. Number two, the location of the landing strip is shown below, with the landing strip being no closer than 200 feet to the property line to the west. That is tax map identified as tax map 50-A-55. Number three, the landing strip is limited to 1,200 feet in length and 300 feet in width. And number four, the approach of the landing strip shall be from the east to the west, and takeoff shall be from the west to the east as shown on the plan. In conclusion, since the Planning Commission public hearing, we have received additional written comments from 2 adjoining landowners. Both of these were forwarded to the Board of Supervisors. One being from Mr. Brian Hornbeck, had some questions on the proposed operation. Mr. Brian and Kim Hornbeck are the owners to the strip of that joins this property to the west. That's tax map number 50-A-55 of the proposed landing strip. Number two was a Mr. Alton Jarvis, submitted 3 questions on the proposed landing strip. Mr. Jarvis and his family owns property to the east, I believe is a correct statement. Mr. Jarvis' questions were number one, what authority verifies the airstrip has been constructed properly with safety considerations taking into account? Number two, how is the safety of the air strip ensured after it is in use? And number three is I assume that the Planning Commission will have to conduct some analysis on the impacts of the airstrip and may have on the environment. If so, will this information be made available to the adjoining property owners? So I believe that questions 1 and 2 are addressed by the FAA and the Virginia Department of Aviation approval. Per question number 3, the Planning Commission is not required to conduct analysis on the impacts of the airstrip may have on the property. With that being said, we're always cognitive of environmental aspects with projects. Mr. Rayburn is not planning to have fuel storage on the site. Per section 714.06, any fuel storage site shall be stored in a double-walled, full flood-proofed fuel container. And again, as stated with these draft conditions, this would be the draft conditions are in addition to the requirements already outlined in the landing strip regulations. So this section would have to be adhered to if fuel storage was placed on the site in the future. With that, I'd like to turn this portion of the presentation over. First of all, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'd like to turn this portion over to Mr. David Rayburn. Mr. Rayburn, we can see you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Perfect. With that being said, I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
All right. First, I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak and walk through this. And special thanks to Chris for all the work he's done in terms of facilitating this whole thing. So the Reader's Digest version here is, my name's Dave Rayburn, and I'm requesting a special exemption application to land an airplane on a farm field. Now, we keep seeing airfield, and that triggers a response. Everybody thinks of runways and taxiways and lights and a big tower and hangars and things like that. But this is a farm field in an agricultural zoning. It's about 6 acres. I hope to get 50 to 75 bales per acre and a couple of cuttings a year. So it is first and foremost a farm field. The history on how we got here is I entered the process. Mr. Slayton facilitated in terms of walking me through it. He talked about the regulations, the 714.00 through 714.13. And I put together a document and submitted it to the Planning Commission in terms of how I was going to address each one of those requirements. And I'm hoping you've had the opportunity to review that, or you have it there in front of you. If you have any questions on that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Before going to the Planning Commission, I had 4 visitors. I had 2 from the Planning Commission. Mr. Slayton also came in and looked at the property, as well as Mr. Hauser, one of my neighbors. And what them allowed them to do is to see in person the area where I was going to, I'm suggesting that I land, where I would fly, and more importantly, where I would not fly. So they had a feel for the whole thing. So we had the Planning Commission, and they voted to go forward with a recommendation. And like Chris said, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Like Chris said, we had 2 people that came back with some questions after the fact. They were not notified in time so they could attend the Planning Commission. And that was Mr. Alton Jarvis and Mr. Brian Hornbeck. Mr. Hornbeck is an absentee landowner in South Carolina. I think Mr. Alton Jarvis is looking out for his father's interest, who has the adjacent property. So Mr. Hornbeck got a hold of Mr. Slayton. Mr. Slayton reviewed the Planning Commission dialogue, and what we said, what the rules were, and how we intend to incorporate or meet the letter of the law on each one of those rules. Mr. Slayton shared that information with me, and I reached out to Mr. Jarvis and Mr. Hornbeck in terms of email exchanges, inviting them to either contact me via email or a phone call if they had any outstanding questions or issues. So what I'd like to do is kind of turn the floor back over to Chris Slayton for a moment. I don't think it's appropriate for the applicant to try to represent the neighbor's position. So Chris, how do you think we left this in terms of the responses from Mr. Hornbeck?
The last email correspondence that he directly wrote to me stated that, you know, and we talked about it, that he was he did have some concerns on the work that had been done to the site. He did have concerns on the proximity of it. But with that being said, he stated that he was going to rely on the county and community organizations to make sure that Mr. Rayburn complies with all required actions on his part, I believe is what the statement said. And I also believe Mr. Hornbeck, I believe, is joining us via Zoom as well. So with the public hearing, we very well may get more comments or more dialogue, if you will.
Excellent. There was some misinformation out there about that I was already landing an airplane on this the alfalfa field, and that's not true. Aviation is highly regulated. It's controlled at a federal level and a state level, and it would be a fast track to losing your pilot's license for unauthorized landings. So I have not, nor will I, land an airplane on this property until I have approval at the Rockbridge level, the state level, and the federal level. And to close the loop, I'll be glad to send all the paperwork that comes back from the state and federal to whoever Rockbridge County designates as the point of contact. So you can see I've kind of closed the loop before I take any action. So with that, let me pause for a moment and see if there's any questions or comments in terms of the approach to meeting the intent of the 714 series of regulations, or any other comments I can respond to.
All right, are there any comments or questions?
Leslie Ayers here. Could you please speak to the fueling or describe what goes into fueling and the possibility or that fuel would be spilt on the property? Could you just speak to that?
Yes, ma'am. Let's see, airplane's just like a pickup truck. It's got a gas tank. It actually has 2 gas tanks. This holds about 25 gallons of fuel. So you fuel it at the airport. I have the airplane based in an airport that's up in Waynesboro. It's called Eagle's Nest. You fuel the airplane there. You would come in, you would land, when you would depart. Now, I'm not going to have any fuel storage. I noticed that in the last presentation about something about a propane tank, they said the threshold for special exemption was like 500 gallons. If I have any fuel at all on site, it's going to be a red 5-gallon fuel can that's a DOT approved, the same one you pour into your lawnmower, right? So since I don't have a hanger out there, I'm not going to leave it out on the fuel on the field. I'd have 5 gallons in my barn or in the shop, just like I would do the lawnmower or the weed whacker or anything else. So there's no fuel storage. Once again, the people that have visited the site get the picture that this is a farm field. I had several comments about how seclusive it is and about the tree buffer around the whole thing. Mr. Sladen showed a diagram about a one-way strip. I did that for 3 reasons. One is I wanted to confine all operations to the perimeter of my property. The second is it's not really practical to fly off to the west for 2 reasons. One, there's a big wall of trees at the end of the field. And the second, the topography goes uphill. So you don't take off into trees and you don't take off into rising terrain. So that limits me to one way in, one way out, no fuel storage on site. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you very much. It was very thorough.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Hearing none, and we will open the public hearing. There's no one signed up to speak in person. Do we have someone online waiting to speak?
Currently, none of the attendees have a hand raised or have left a comment.
We may give them a second. If anyone does like to make comments, there is right under the middle of the screen, there is a hand raise option. So if you would.
There we go. I will go ahead and allow Brian Hornbeck to speak now.
Mr. Hornback, I believe you are muted. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you loud and clear. With that, we'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, I don't have any more questions. I appreciated the presentation. Mr. Rayburn has shared the information with me and Mr. Sladen. I've reviewed it and discussed it with Mr. Jarvis, and I'm satisfied with what we've got. So it was very, very detailed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hornbeck. Anyone else? Then we will close the public hearing. Concerns from the board?
I don't have any concerns. I just had 1 or 2 questions. With the, so there won't actually, he's landing in a field. There won't be any lights or anything like that out there.
It is required to be a grass field.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And the distance from the landing area to the adjacent property line, what would you estimate that to be?
200 feet.
Okay.
So the grass field, bear with me here, the grass field itself is about 120 feet away from the property line, but with the landing strip activity being 200 feet.
Okay. And along the property line, is there trees or?
There are definitely some of them. There are definitely some trees. You can see the Mr. and Mrs. Hornbeck's pasture. You know, when I do know when you're coming into the Rayburn's property, you can see a pasture with some cows on it that's owned by Mr. and Mrs. Hornbeck. But with that being said, there are some vegetated trees between the two property lines. And I can pull it up on GIS to fully answer your question if you'd like.
I guess my only question was if the grass area was overshot or if the plane wasn't able to stop, what stops it from going to the neighbor's property?
Trees.
Trees.
And then we'll have to worry about it.
I was relying on your expertise with that one, Mr. Rayburn. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, I don't say it in jest. It literally is one way. So if you have to abort a landing, if things are not going well, say I'm flying in and there are deer on the runway, then I have to put power on the airplane and then come around again. But if I made a mistake, the airplane could not go into the neighbor's property. So let's talk about the kinds of margins that we apply to this. The stated landing distance of this type of airplane is 140 feet. Now, I don't accept that. It's like looking at the sticker in the window of a car that gives you miles per gallon. It's an interesting data point, but it's not something I would plan my vacation to. So I take that number and I double it. So it's 300 feet. And that's for the airplane. You have to compensate for the pilot as well. So my personal threshold is whatever it takes to land the airplane, and I triple that. So now I'm at 900 feet. The field's at 1,100 feet. So that doesn't mean there is zero chance that I couldn't go off the end of the runway and into some trees. I can't state that. But what I can state that is it is a significant margin on both the airplane itself and as well as myself as the pilot. Does that help or answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is there any time limit as to when it can be used?
No, sir. During daylight hours, per the ordinance, it has to be used during daylight hours, but there were no conditions associated with days of the week, frequency of use, other than obviously limiting to 2 airplanes itself.
And that's limited because it's not lit, correct?
Well, there's lots of reasons you can't fly. You don't fly at night. There's nothing to see. You're not going anywhere. So there's no lighting there. There's no instrumentation. There's no tower. So it would be a very bad situation to try to land on that. So I guess that's a long yes.
Any other questions or concerns? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Okay. Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniels?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Application's approved.
Mr. Slayden, just a question in reference to that. I didn't want to interrupt that part of the process, but I don't know that there's a whole lot of things applied to crops here from the air in our area. But do we have anything in our regulations about? I mean, so what I'm getting at is on an agricultural property, do we have to have a special exception permit? I mean, obviously, or we wouldn't be here, but
yes, for a landing strip, absolutely, yes, sir. So that would not. So it's an interesting question. So that I believe, without looking into further, I believe that you could not operate that type of operation from I say it in confidence, you could not operate that type of operation for this landing strip because this prohibits commercial activities. So this is a private, non-commercial
But
landing.
you could operate a crop dusting plane over a farm.
Sure, there's no zoning requirement.
Yeah, but the landing.
Just taking and landing and taking off. But
Well, what if you left from your own farm? Is it?
You would be required to have a special exception permit for a non-commercial, private non-commercial landing strip on your own farm to be able to land the airplane or take off the airplane from that area.
So Chris, maybe I can help.
Oh,
I can't talk to the Rockbridge County rules, but what the federal aviation regulation, they're very strict about how close you can fly to a person, structure, or vehicle. And it's different depending on where you are. If you're over a highly populated area, that would be Lexington, it's 1,000 feet. If it's over a rural area, it's 500 feet. So one of the reasons we're here is to land, I have to be lower than 500 feet. So that's why we're getting permission. Does that help?
Yes, sir.
I think so. Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We have one more public hearing. Application for an amendment to existing proffers associated with the conditional rezoning in the residential mixed zoning district.
Yes. Mr. Brazel Hamrick is physically attending the meeting here. He's coming on now. With that, I'd like to share my screen one last time.
Sorry, Chris, who is that that's going to be promoted to a panelist?
I'm sorry, he is physically here, but thank you. All right, our last public hearing this evening on the planning and zoning side of things, at least, is JBLN Investments LLC application for a proffer amendment in the mixed residential, that's the R2 zoning district. So again, briefly going over the area zoning, the light pink on the map is agricultural transitional AT. The dark red would be Walmart Lowe's in this case, but it's general business B1. The yellow is residential, general residential R1, and the darker yellow, if you will, is mixed residential R2. The property outlined in magenta is identified as tax map number 62-33-22 and is 8.608 per tax records, and it is in the residential 2 residential mixed district. Mr. Brazel Hamrick with JBLN Investments LLC has made an application for amendment to proffers associated with the previous approved conditional rezoning in order to continue a cluster subdivision for single-family dwelling lots. Again, the property is further identified as 62-33-22. The property is located in the residential mixed R2 zoning district and was conditionally rezoned with acceptance of proffers. The original condition rezoning was approved by the Board of Supervisors on February 3rd, 2009, and that was actually a proffer amendment at that time. The 2009 proffered plan included multifamily development with access, including a loop road. This is the rezoning plan for the current proposal. The pending application reduces the number of multifamily units and includes 25 lots for single-family dwellings. Access to the single-family dwellings will be off a northern entrance off a thoroughbred circle. Again, if I could just use my pointer here, this is going to be thoroughbred circle. This is at the point where into state maintenance here, and then it turns to a private portion. This is the first access to the townhomes, future townhomes, and the access to the single family dwelling lots you'll continue going northeast, and then this is the proposed access road coming down through here called Triple Crown Lane with a cul-de-sac, and then you would exit the same way after looping the cul-de-sac. Access to single-family dwellings will be off the northern entrance of Thoroughbred Circle and will terminate at a cul-de-sac. Last year, the top layer of asphalt was installed to Thoroughbred Circle. The developer and staff has been in conversations with VDOT on the final steps required to bring the existing road into the state system. The road under the proposed road to the proposed cluster subdivision will be designated and designed and incorporated into the state system. Daggone, I apologize once again. I did not save these things quick enough. Planning Commission, on January 13th, 2021, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the application and acceptance with the proffer statement. Mr. Brazel Hamrick with JB&L Investments has submitted a proffer statement that states that, quote, the development of the property, tax map 62-33-22, 8.60 acres for which the application is being made shall be in substantial concordance with the concept plan of development prepared by Hamrick Engineering, PC, titled JB&L Investments, LLC, preliminary plat dated February 24th, 2013, with a revision date of January 12th, 2021. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Brazel Hamrick, who is physically joining us this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, Brazel Hamrick. Such an excellent presentation. I think I'll just ask if you have any questions. Obviously, my point is hopefully you will follow suit with the Planning Commission and allow us to build some additional single-family dwellings and a few townhomes.
Any questions?
Was there ever any concern raised about this being a one-way in and a cul-de-sac?
No, sir. I think this is probably the third time I've had this piece of property to you all. Originally, everything was going to be at townhomes. I think I had something like 80 townhouse units in there. And while all that looked good on paper, I think the economic reality, that it's better suited for single family. And I came back to the Planning Commission and they actually requested the townhouse access be separated from the single family access. Which made me happy because there is a gas line in between those two developments. And that gets very complicated in terms of just getting permission to go over it. I mean, ultimately I would, as you know, Thoroughbred Circle crosses it twice, but it's just one more bureaucratic step that I was like, okay. And I get keeping the two separate entities. At the traffic volumes, from an engineering perspective, I see no issue whatsoever. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
And the single family homes, are they designed for like as starter homes for younger couples with families, or are they larger homes for,
Well,
are you expecting?
It will be just very similar to what is out there right now. And basically, I mean, they're your citizens. We got a couple firemen out there. We got 2 or 3 secondary school education people, a couple college professors with W&L, beauticians, a jailer.
Banker.
We did have a banker.
Yeah.
The banker sold his place.
Oh, did he? Okay.
He did. The banker sold his place, and I'm not sure where he went. I think he was wanting to go up around the country club somewhere. I mean, it's just a good family spot. Quiet as a pin when you're out there in the evening times, and everyone's got to be happy. I mean, I think in terms of happiness, when I drive through, everybody keeps their yard real nice and neat and clean. And I see right now, anything you put on the market, you're going to be able to sell. And
if people didn't like it out there, I'm sure I'd see a whole lot more for sale signs. I mean, I've probably had 2 in the last couple years as a pre-existing house. So you see very limited turnover. Looks nice. Drive around.
Okay.
Take a look.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hammer.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing. And there's no one signed up here. Is there anyone online?
No, sir. There are no comments online.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing. Questions, comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
A motion to approve?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. All right, Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes?
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. Application approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hammer, could you wait just a minute? Would you?
Okay. Board comments. We have a budget meeting on February the 3rd. Do we have a time for that? Mr. Suter, is that
It's at 5:30.
5:30? Our next regular meeting will be February the 8th. And Mike, when will we have people come present to the board? There,
It's at that February 3rd meeting.
that will be the meeting they come and present. Obviously, we can't bring them all in like we usually do. We welcome their input. So please make sure they know they're welcome, but they're not required. You know, I don't want them to feel they have to be in here. And if we're gonna take them electronically, please tell them we'd like them to have a camera so we can see who we're talking to.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, just as a side note, I know we heard from Chief Ramsey recently about the vaccinations and vaccines out there. From what I've heard, there are some issues with disbursement of the vaccine to the different groups. Perhaps at some point we could have, I believe it's Dr. Cornegay, who's over our district health department, come or present electronically to give us an update on that.
Okay. Spencer, can you reach out to Dr. Cornegay?
I will.
Okay, see if she would do that. I know that the health center will be distributing vaccinations. They put up a link on their webpage and had so many people sign up, they had to shut the link down because they don't have the supply to administer it. So people who are interested, if they check that webpage, when they get a supply, and they'll start taking applications, and then they will contact people for appointment. We know our teachers are getting Thursday and Friday.
I believe that's the concern amongst a large portion of our population is the supply and
Right.
lack thereof.
I believe you're correct. So I don't think it's the logistics as much as they just don't have it to give. But it'd be good if Dr. Cornegay could.
I just got a little additional information about that. I'll share with the board. It is the information I received, it is a supply issue from the federal level getting to the state. But there's always things we can do to advocate.
Right. And to make sure you fill out your application on the, I think BDH website too for the Shenandoah Valley. So you can get in the queue that way. But that's a good point. Any other comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
A second?
Second.
Any objection? We'll be adjourned then. Thank you. Yeah, I got on the 15th. They just happened to flip. My wife said, "Oh, look,